Welcome into the Backroads Built podcast. I'm Ben, and on today's episode, we are talking about the Wolfman, Joe Laflamme, who I know you could probably guess from his name, but he tamed wolves, and he brought those wolves all over North America on different tours. It was a whole attraction to go and see him. But at the same time, he was also a fugitive from the law, as he was somebody who was running alcohol illegally across Canada and across Northern Ontario. This was back in the mid 1900s, and today we have the lady on who literally wrote the novel on Joe. Suzanne Charron comes in to talk about Joe's legacy, his life, and again, the legacy that he left behind. He also, by the way, put Gogama, Ontario on the map. As you'll see, there's a really cool guided tour that's based on all these different locations that are tied to the legacy that is Joe. So all of that on the way following a word from today's lead sponsor, the North Bay Regional Health Center Foundation.
Dear North Bay, you've always been more than a place on the map. You're home to me. This is where I built a life with my husband, raised our kids, and taught in local schools for over 24 years. I'm proud to be part of this community. Earlier this year, my world shifted. After living with anxiety, depression, and PTSD for much of my life, I reached a point where I couldn't keep going alone. Walking into the emergency department at the North Bay Regional Health Center was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But what I found there changed everything. A nurse who made me feel safe, a crisis worker who truly listened. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. That care gave me hope, and it inspired me to give back by supporting local healthcare so that others in our community can access the same compassionate care I did. If my story resonates with you, I hope you'll consider supporting the NBRHC Foundation. Please visit nbrhcfoundation.ca or call 705-495-8125 to give. Because mental health is health. With gratitude, Tiffany Van Meer.
Well, we've had a number of authors on the program, especially recently. We've had the pleasure of talking to a number, and we have another one here, this time in person, which is always a treat because normally we do these online. But with us today is Suzanne Charron, which I think I got that right. I know French names are not my forte, but I think I got there. You are the author of this really interesting story. It's called Wolfman, Joe Laflamme, Tamer Untamed. Did I get that whole title right?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're really glad, Suzanne, to have you on the Backroads Build podcast. Not only just because of the book and all the research and the whole story about probably one of Northern Ontario's most, I think, one of the most important legends we have. He was a real showman. And at the same time, Ben, I want to show this off right now. There should be a Backroads Bill beer because one was named after Joe many years later. I mean, a legacy to this Wolfman. And that's what we're going to talk about today with Suzanne. And Suzanne's first question is, like, how did you come to know Joe and become, I want to use the word infatuated, but certainly interested?
Passionate.
Yeah, exactly. How did all that occur?
That occurred when I moved to Gogama. I was about 20 years old. And maybe a year later, a colleague of us, I went there with my husband to teach. A colleague of mine invited us to play cards at his apartment. His apartment happened to be in Joe Laflamme's former house, which was separated in different apartments. Joe had passed away in 1965, so he was no longer there. And as soon as I got in, and it was raining cats and dogs outside, the wind was howling, literally howling. And when I came in, my friend took my coat, and I didn't even have a chance to sit down. He started talking to me about Joe Laflamme. Did you know that Joe Laflamme came into this house and lived into this house and brought in his moose and brought in his wolves? And it immediately captured my attention. And I think Joe's essence just clung to me from there. I was only about 21 there. So I said that to myself, that would make an interesting story to write. But at 21, I wasn't ready to write a story at all. But Joe hung on, and took me about 35 years before getting down to actually writing, researching and writing.
Well, the research is impeccable, and it's when we look at Joe Laflamme, Ben, as a Northern Ontario legend. He was a real showman, and we should try to introduce Joe before we, like, Suzanne, you can maybe describe Joe to us in a capsule, and then, I mean, we're going to go off on a bunch of tangents. But he came to, how did he come to Gogama? And of course, how did he become a character?
That's a long story. You should read the book.
Yeah, I've read the book.
But anyways,
and I've been to the school. I've been to the school where you taught, actually, in Gogama as well. And we'll talk a little bit about Gogama as we go. But anyway, the character Joe Laflamme.
Well, he first of all, when he was living in Montreal, he was born southwest of Montreal, but he lived in Montreal a few years. He was a police officer. And after that, he had to resign from the police force because he was involved in something that wasn't too legal. And I think he started, we're not sure, the family doesn't remember exactly, but he was involved in bootlegging. And from some of the stories, well, of course, the police were after him, and he ran away. And he I don't know, somehow he heard of Gogama, which was very isolated at the time. The only way you could get in was by boat or by plane or maybe a dog sled. And he moved there, and there was a lot of lumber jobs. And he started raising huskies and transporting goods to the different lumber camps around Gogama, because there was several way out in the bush, especially in the winter, because in the summer they use horses, but that wasn't very practical in about 2 meters of snow. So the dog sled. But in 1923, most of his huskies died of distemper, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. And so he had no way of making a living. Well, I think he started bootlegging before that, but it wasn't enough to pay the bills. So he started trapping, and he caught a wolf in a trap, a beaver trap, and I guess the animal had just been trapped, so the leg wasn't damaged or anything. I don't know, he got the brilliant idea at the time of putting that wolf on his sleigh, not in the harness that was drawing his sleigh, because he did have, I guess, I don't know if he borrowed some huskies or something, but he did have a sleigh then with huskies, and he just got home with it. It was a female wolf with her, and she seemed to catch on. So that gave him the idea, why don't I catch other wolves and do a full wolf team? So he tried that. There was nothing he wouldn't try. That guy had, he was pretty renegade. So, and he started from there. He didn't have a full wolf team before 1938-39. So he had to do a mix of wolf and dogs, huskies and wolves. And but that was his big dream, to have a full wolf team. And he finally got that in 1939. But he started getting a lot of media attention from the States, from Southern Ontario and things like that, as soon as 1924. And I guess that went to his head, I don't know. And he was invited to, he was invited by the Toronto Daily Star to do a full week with his team at the Winter Carnival. So he was the real showman there. He attracted crowds bigger than the Santa Claus parade. Can you imagine? So, anyways, he went from that week of Carnival. He got on to sportsman shows in I think in Montreal, New York, Boston, Chicago, and a lot of other places in northeastern United States, and he had fun with that, because He's a showman. You can really say that he's a showman. He's a Laflamme. He likes to have attention.
So I guess he domesticated these wolves, eh? Like they were able, or because I mean, domesticating them that they're okay for you is one thing, but then to be able to bring them into a public space is a completely different thing.
I wouldn't say they were domesticated. It's very hard to socialize a wolf unless you do it when they're very young.
Yeah, and it sounds like he just kind of grabbed these as adults, right?
Yes, adults or young wolves, like teenagers, more or less. And once you've had that critical few weeks when they're pups, it's very hard to domesticate them, as you say. So he was working with more or less, you could describe it as teenagers on hormones. You never knew. He never knew when they would turn against him. He said he was a trainer or a tamer, but at many occasions he said you can't really train or tame wolves, especially wild ones like that. Yeah.
Now, Gogama, and for people that don't know their geography in Northern Ontario, between Timmins and Sudbury, just off of what is now Highway 144, as you said earlier, at one time you could only get in through the CNR Railway or come in other means before the highway was ever there. And he lived in Gogama at the time. There may have been 2,000 people now. Actually, I just finished the story. It's about 300. But at the time, he was known to be a real character in the community. He kind of lived on the edge. I'm not going to say he had an unsavory character, but he was a character nonetheless, and had flirtations been with the law on occasion. So, why did he leave Gogama?
Because of the law again.
Yeah.
In 1947, he was involved into, he was always in how would you say, scuffle or whatever?
Yeah, scuffles, yeah.
Scuffle with the law, one way or the other, because he was a bootlegger.
What is bootlegging in that? Okay, I know what bootlegging is nowadays. But what are you bootlegging though?
Liquor.
Oh, it was liquor.
Yeah,
Because now when I think of it, I think of usually it was like media. Like it would be like music or TV.
No, liqucker, hard liquor.
Yeah.
Hard liquor.
This makes more
even
sense because I'm
beer.
like, what are you bootlegging?
He had a still on one of the islands on Lake Minisinawa, away from the police. So, and that's one of the reasons he liked to have wolves on his team of. With the sleigh.
So you could chase off
because they're faster than dogs. And he hid the liquor in his semi-basement. He hid the liquor into other abandoned buildings. He hid the liquor underneath fence post. He just had lifted those up and put some liquor in there. He in pile of woods. He had liquor all over the place.
Why? Okay, so because I hear about people doing this a lot, and there was no prohibition, like it was legal, but why? Because we talked about this a little bit. I can't remember who it was. We talked about this with the Barulico story about the gold in the hockey sticks. But like, why would you bootleg liquor? Like, is it just not accessible? Could you not get it? Like, what's the...
Well,
At first, I think there was prohibition when he moved there. Yeah,
I thought it was only in the U.S.
No.
Was there prohibition?
It was
But because he was going out to all these camps by dog sled, he would be transporting. People would want liquor. They weren't coming back and forth, and wherever and whenever. I guess it was a commodity.
And he has also had a lodge or a kind of a hotel. And because there was a lot of transient workers on the railroads, on the roads eventually, and maybe even the camps, the lumber mills downtown. So he had a lot of means, a lot of ways to distribute his liquor, sell his liquor. And there was a lot of hotels, but they closed a little earlier, so he took up the slack. And and there was also the natives living on the reserve about 20 kilometers.
Well, he knew how to keep a low profile.
Eh?
I said he knew how to keep a low profile.
No, he left for Montreal. By that time, he was probably into his 40s or 50s, I guess. And
50s, yeah.
And he continued to be a showman right up to his dying days.
Almost, yes. And he left, I think it was 1947, he went to the CNE. And he had a special permission from the police to go because he was wanted. for liquor again, and I think theft was involved. And he had permission to do the show because he was committed. And I think in the meantime, he had moved some of his animals because in 1947, he had some wolves, but he had moose as well. And so he moved his moose on his brother's farm, his favorite brother's farm, who was not too impressed. Because imagine putting a moose, or even he had 2 or 3 moose then, in the barn with the cows. That wasn't very good for milk production. The stress involved. So, and after that, he just ran away and moved to his son's house, his brother's farm, and hid there. But he was okay as long as he didn't come back to Ontario.
Wow.
Can you imagine, Ben? I don't know how we're going to pick this up, but the Life magazine, that was the
Hold it up a little bit higher there.
Yeah, this is the go-to magazine at the time. This is March of 1948, and you go with inside, here, and we've got, it's called The Mumbling Moose, but on his way to the ABC broadcast, a visiting moose gets tangled with a wolf acting as his chaperone, bearded trainer Joe Laflamme, and he's coming out of an elevator. So can you imagine in downtown New York at the time, a Joe Laflamme with a moose and a wolf, and he knew how to attract a crowd. He knew how to attract attention. And so when you think about in this day and age of people, creating a spin or creating a buzz about that, Joe knew how to do that. Do you think that was just in his personality? Was that within his DNA, do you think?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. There's no other way. At some point, there was these young fellows around Gogama, teenagers. They helped them, go get some wood for the moose and go bring them to the lake to drink and all this stuff. And one of them stopped because there, as you know, there's a railroad crossing Gogama, and stopped there to wait for the train to pass by. And he had the moose on a leash. And people started taking photos and paying the young fellow for the photos, probably a dime or whatever. And Joe got wind of that. So he started going to the water hole with the moose. He wanted the attention.
Yeah, he wanted the attention, of course, as another way to make money, I suppose. And again, because he had a kind of a lodge and he had this and that, he kind of survived, and he had a family. He
had a wife. She came directly from Paris. Imagine, oh, wow. Paris, France. She stayed a few months in Montreal when she came over, and then she moved with Joe to Gogama in 1920. Imagine. It's a culture shock for sure. And he had a son. He had another son that died very early and a daughter that died very early as well. But his son Morris got to adulthood, and he traveled often with him to help him with the animals and the gear, because you carry animals around to all those shows. You need to bring the food. You need to bring the wood. You need to bring. He usually slept with his animals in some kind of barn wherever he could. So it was a lot of gear involved, but he usually had an assistant to help him out, and his son as well.
Yeah, it's really fascinating when you look at his. We talk about the showmanship of Joe and all that, the wolves in the show, and you think he'd be well off because you think that would make a lot of money, especially in today's day and age. I feel like you could probably make more, but it doesn't seem like he was super well off.
No, he was making, for one show, he was making maybe $400, which it sounds then, like a lot.
Yeah.
But travel with the animals, he had to find transportation, so he had to pay for that. And sometimes he used a truck, or rented a truck, and sometimes he rented a plane. You had to pay for the licenses. You have to pay for his lodging and stuff like that. He wasn't making any money out of that.
North Bay's turning 100, and what a time to be here. From the buzz of the Heritage Parade to sunset concerts at the waterfront, the city is alive with celebration. And you know who's right in the middle of it all? Homewood Suites by Hilton North Bay. We're proud to be a part of this milestone moment. Whether you're coming home from a family reunion, planning a gathering with friends, or just simply making the most of everything the Centennial has to offer, our doors are open. Stay in a spacious suite that feels like home, with a full kitchen to cook in, room to relax, and a space to unwind after a full day of fun. Are you hosting something bigger? Our event spaces and amazing local partners like the Grand and Stock Transportation make it easy to bring people together. Best of all, they're just steps from the action. The fireworks, the food trucks, the music, the laughter, it's all right here. Celebrate 100 years of North Bay with us. Use code Centennial to save on your stay anytime this year. Be at home with Homewood Suites by Hilton North Bay. Join the party today at 495 Oak Street West or give us a call at 705-495-3000.
It's almost that time of year. Early mornings at the rink, fresh notebooks and backpacks, and a community gearing up for another great season of varsity sports. At Source for Sports North Bay, we're proud to be part of it all. Whether it's finding your kid's first pair of skates, gearing up for tryouts, or outfitting your team for the season ahead, we've got you covered. Because here, we're not just a sports store, we're neighbors, coaches, teammates, and fans. And we're proud to cheer you on every shift, step, and stride of the way. Visit Source for Sports North Bay at 1321 Fisher Street and let us help you along your way. So you brought these pamphlets for us. Yes. This is your self-guided historical tour in Gogama. Yes. A little bit of information. I don't know if...
And I'll pick this up here.
It's kind of neat because in the inside, there are... I'll try and take a picture of this after and put it up there, but yeah, you got it's in the footsteps of Joe Laflamme, a self-guided tour based on your biography of him. And yeah, so take us through a couple of these places and why they're so important. I know you'll probably have to, I don't know if you know it all off by heart, but...
Well, I do, just to pick up some...
Because there's some interesting stuff in here, right? Like you have things like the M&R, like the Winter Air Base.
I was going to talk about that.
Yeah, so what's going on with that one?
In 1939, he did a tour in the U.S., and he that's where he took transportation to go to that tour, because he had reserved train tickets before, but it was about 40 below, so that was way too cold for the wolves, because it was a few hours from Gogama to Sudbury by train, so he didn't want the wolves to, they're doing nothing. They can't move around too much in a train car and everything else. So he decided, well, his wolves will be treated well, so he decided to rent a plane. And that's where the plane picked him up, at the Winter Air Base. And he lost one of his wolves before getting on the plane, so the pilot and himself had to run after it. And then imagine, he paid the whole transportation for himself, his assistant, and 10 wolves. Traveling as independent passengers. So they weren't tethered or on leash or anything. They were loose. I mean, they paid their fare, so the pilot was kind of stuck in the front, and he wasn't looking back. But at one point, it's when it's on takeoff that was the worst. Because imagine the sensation for a wolf as you take off like this, and the noise and the inclination and everything else. He had mutiny on board there, and those planes were lined in canvas inside at that time, and Joe had mucklucks. By the time they arrived to Sudbury, the canvas inside was all shredded, and there was not much left of his mucklucks either. So,
did anybody know what his secret was?
His secret?
To be able to domesticate the wolves. Like, is there any information on that? Is that a trade secret? I feel like because you have all the ins and outs here. Yeah,
he didn't have a secret. He had a very, very strong aura or persona. And that showed the wolves that he was the leader of the pack, even though they tried to. He apparently had a lot of bite marks on his legs and arms and everything else. So he didn't get out of this whole thing scotch-free. And So, he is just very, very strong person. Now, he did have to use the whip a few times, not on the wolves, but next to the wolves to attract their attention. It's a 40-foot-long whip. So, especially when he was in a crowd. So, it's a very, very, he was very, very attentive. He knew the wolves' body language. So he could sort of anticipate some of their moves. And that's how he had to be totally aware. That's why when he grew older, it was kind of more difficult because he suffered from low blood pressure. So he was kind of tired. So he might not have been quite as aware to handle a whole team of wild wolves. So it's just his personality. First of all, he was 6'2", I believe, which was very tall at the time. If you visit in museums, often the door frames are a lot lower than that. So he had a presence, and the wolves felt that. Wolves are extremely sensitive to their surroundings and to the people around them. So
he was definitely the alpha male. No, the book speaks for itself. So does. In Northern Ontario, only has about 200 years of colonial history, and when you think about it, North Bay celebrating its 100th anniversary as a city, going back to 1925. It was established about 1882 when the railway came across Northern Ontario. And there are very few books. Grey Owl was a kind of an international Canadian character, and we know about the Great Imposter. But you picked up on Joe because you were there as a young person. You picked up later on to do the research, and you did a lot of research. When you look back at this now, and I've asked you this question before in the print media, what's your relationship with Joe?
Like I said, when I visited his house for the first time, it's like his energy just clung to me, and it stayed there because we all have an inner life. Everybody has an inner world that nobody's parley to, and sometimes spiritual entities visit your inner life. Sometimes it could be an ancestor, a grandfather, a deceased person that you knew well. It could be people in your past lives, if you believe in that. And they're there for a purpose. So I guess Joe entered my inner world, and he just stayed there in the backdrop until I was ready to write the story. He came to the surface once in a while, and you should write that story. You should write that story. And I said, I'm not going to write the story. I didn't feel ready to write a story of this, and I had very few information to base myself upon. When I left Gogama, I stayed there the first time 9 years. When I left Gogama, I collected everything that I could find on Joe Laflamme. I had a very small binder of about maybe, 15, 20 articles. And I had that in my library. I had to move to Montreal at one point. Following Joe's territory.
Yeah, I was going to say, following his footsteps a little bit. Eh?
But, I was cleaning up my library not too long before I moved to Ontario, and I had this small binder, and I hadn't got down to writing the story yet. I just threw the binder, and I recycle, so I don't know what happened to me. I just threw the binder in the wastebasket, and I said, I don't think I'll ever write that story, and blah, blah, blah. And this voice inside my head kept, pick that binder up, you'll need it. Pick that binder up, you'll need it. I picked it up, and sure enough, a few months later, I started researching. So I took every one of those articles, and I went through them with a fine-tooth comb. Every lead I could get, I tried to follow, because you said there's a lot of research in my book, and that's only half the research I'd done, because I had numbered everything. And I couldn't put any research in there, any reference that had led to nothing. So,
How long did it take for you to do your research? Because I'm assuming it probably took a few years to write the book.
It's kind of I was working the two together, more or less. Mm-hmm. It took me 4 years to research and write the book in both languages.
Would you say that the research was probably the hardest part, the hardest challenge? If you're talking to an author, right, who's trying to do something similar, I guess a better question would be, if you're talking to an author who's trying to do something similar, what would you tell them when it comes to research to make their life maybe a little bit easier? Or
I don't know. It's kind of you're kind of an archaeologist when you do research like that, because he was born in 1889, so there's a lot of information about him that doesn't exist anymore. There's no official records. They burned down. They've been lost. So you're kind of a detective, an archaeologist, and you're trying to put everything together. I didn't find the research hard. I find it very, very interesting, because every new thing that I discovered about him, I says, there he goes again.
And I guess that's similar to you, Bill, right? Because you do the same thing for your stories in a way where you have to contact people, and you have to contact the people of the people who, and in your case, like a lot of the people who are directly involved aren't around anymore, or are very, very old, right?
Well,
during a lot of this,
I interviewed several dozen people, and just by the time I interviewed some and the book was launched, I lost 8 of those. So we were losing the anecdotal bank. So it was a good thing that I did it at that time. At least I picked up people who knew him, and it was quite interesting to interview those people and to talk about Joe Laflamme and Gogama and whatever. And
I often say that the anecdotal, like oral history, again, we need to record this digitally or otherwise, or we lose this, because in this particular case, you made this person come to life and in an entire I guess spectrum of Joe Laflamme's life. And I love the subtitle, Tamer Untamed, because that's the kind of person he was. He was such a character here in Northern Ontario. And I haven't done anything about this, and it's not my really place, but when you see the signs on Highway 144, it should say underneath, the home of Joe Laflamme. It should say that, because people will say, well, first of all, who's Joe Laflamme? Because it's not a household name, perhaps not even like Grey Owl, but nonetheless, we have so many characters in our early history, like Noah Timmins, who in the mining side of the Timmins mining camp story, and many, many others, but we don't know of them. We don't salute them very well, and this is what intrigued me about the book. And of course the thorough research and the photos, and I really could say, here is a showman, like par excellence.
Oh, definitely. And there's quite a few photos in the book, but I managed to uncover about 300 photos. And when I met Joe's grandson, he gave me another several hundred photos. Not all of them were about Joe, but some I didn't have. And I'm sure there's other photos of Joe, other newspaper articles about Joe that are hanging around there, but how do I get hold of that?
Right. Yeah. So you wrote an English version and a French version. Did you find a difference between the two? Because you can't directly translate between the two languages, right? Like there's different things. I guess there's different nuances in between them. So first question is, did you write the English one first or the French one?
I interviewed the Laflammes, but I could, and they're all French. But I wanted to write it in English so that Jerry Talbot, which you met, could see it first, because he lived in Gogama. He had some of the archives. His mother worked for Joe, and so I wanted him to be the first to see it and just giving me a sense of where I was going with that. And after that, I wanted the Laflammes to read the story, because I knew a lot more about their uncle, cousin, whatever, than any of them knew, because Joe visited, but he didn't relate his whole life, and there's a lot about him they didn't know. So they were eager for the book to get out, because they wanted to know more about their relative, and so I wanted both books, because oftentimes when you translate or get a book translated, it's not launched at the same time. Maybe a couple of years later. I didn't want that. And I met with both publishers in Sudbury. At the time, it was Scrivener Press and Prise de Parole. I wanted northern publishers, and I wanted to do the launching I had this whole vision in my head, I wanted to do the launching in Gogama, on the very grounds where Joe Laflamme used to train his wolves and dogs and wolves to the sled, which is in front of the museum now, which was the Hudson's Bay at the time. And I wanted a simultaneous launching, and both publishers agreed, and I think that's probably a first in
And did you
Ontario.
write the French version as well, or was that
everything from A to Z, because giving it to somebody else would have taken more time.
Did you find it kind of, when you were writing it again in French, did you find it easy? Was it maybe, was there a challenge that came with that? Or
No, because I'm trained. I was trained in communications. I used to write articles in French and English.
Oh,
and,
so it's like second nature for you.
Yeah.
What do we take away from Joe Laflamme as a character in Northern Ontario?
I think his legacy to us is to follow our passion. Sure, we can't all handle wolves like he did, and we I don't recommend doing everything he did too. But we each have a passion, and this world is a better place when a person, develops his or her passion and follows through with it, because that is unique to every person. And I think that's what I'm taking out from this whole story is Joe's. He's kind of pushing us to, hey, I did this, but you can do that,
Mm-hmm. And you did bring one last thing that we haven't talked about yet, but that's the trap.
Well, the lake hold trap. It's a reasonable facsimile that, and it's padded because Joe would have had beaver trap, but he would have had to use this and of course, not break the wolf's legs, and it would be held here until he got it there and was able to retrieve the wolf. But yeah, the whole story. And Suzanne, I'll say Latitude 46 is where you can find the book. Obviously, people will be looking for this on the Backroads Bill podcast. And thanks very, very much for being on today's show.
You're quite welcome.
Thank
Thank
you
you for having me, both of you.
Well, a big thank you to Suzanne for joining us in studio. Always great to have people coming in studio for this week's episode. And if you find yourself on the back roads, go check out Gogama. Go check out her really cool tour, guided tour of all of these interesting worlds of Joe. Of course, we'll put in the link in the description where you can purchase the book that Suzanne wrote about Joe, the Wolfman. Really interesting read, really interesting life, and kind of crazy that he wasn't even more popular. Imagine if Joe was around in today's day and age, in the age of social media, even back in the early 2000s, late 90s, with late night and everything like that. It was a lawless time, a little bit more back then, but it's kind of neat. So if you enjoyed this week's episode, you can check out more episodes of the Backroads Bill podcast on your favorite podcast player. The video version is available on the North Bay Echo YouTube channel. And if you want to see some really cool pictures and you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple or wherever you catch your podcasts, we have some really cool photos that are on the video version. So if you didn't check out the video version, you can do that over at the North Bay Echo YouTube channel. And of course, everything we do is available on northbayecho.ca, where you can also find a bunch of other great local podcasts. And check out our newsletter, Echo Essentials, which is, of course, free. It comes to your inbox every week and gives you a little bit of a slice of life of what's going on in North Bay, as well as what's going on the Echo Network. So that wraps things up for us here. Join us again next week for another Backroads adventure.